proper ways.
Do you convey that to them in those explicit terms like that, connecting spirituality to changes in the outside world?
Absolutely, because we start off with just in their school lives. We're talking about kids right now, right? Okay, yeah, because we do it with everybody, but with kids, we talk about their school lives. What are some of the problems? What are some of the difficulties that they're having? How does spirituality, how does God within them make them become better students, better friends, boyfriend, girlfriend, adolescents right now? That's the bigger problem. Forget about their school life. How are they going to be a better boyfriend, better girlfriend? And especially when the girlfriend looks at somebody else and then you're stuck out there, you know, without anything. What do? Do you have enough confidence in yourself to believe that God is with you and you can move on in your life? You know, these are major crises for adolescents, and to understand that God, this power beyond them, is working within them is probably the greatest comfort, not only for adolescents, but for anybody.
Yeah. Why don't we talk about it in the entire community too, with adults? Could you tell me a little bit about the blood drive? Because I always found that to be an interesting project.
The blood drive is one of my favorites. We do that right on April 24th with the provision that people understand they could do it throughout the year, but most of them always end up doing it one time a year, and that's very nice. It's a real simple slogan we came up with. In 1915, we gave blood against our will. Today, we give blood for the sake of humanity, to help humanity, willingly. And I think this really hits a nerve with the people, because you go back to 1915 where the Turks were just exterminating Armenians. Blood was being shed. Okay? Now look at that's the life of any community, of people, right? And here we have an opportunity to give life to others. The Red Cross gives us this formula of 4 to 1. For each pint that we pump out, we save 4 lives. So that's a really nice statistic too for our people. So now we've given them something, a challenge, okay? You have the ability to help 4 lives, and we invite them to come. You have most Armenians on April 24th will light up and remember their Armenianism. They'll remember that we are one people. They'll remember what the Turks did. Most of them will end up at some demonstration or at some commemorative program, and then all of it is forgotten on April 25th. Forgotten in the sense that they've gone back to their regular lives. The person who gives blood continues. He's continuing the tradition. He's giving blood. The next day his blood is being used. It's going on to life. And then you have a sore on your arm, which makes you at least remember it for a few more days. So it's this whole campaign that we've put together just to get people to realize that as Armenians they have an obligation beyond themselves. What's interesting about it is we will always inevitably get Armenians who will come up to the blood drive and say, well, of course this Armenian's going to help Armenians. And that's, again, the ghetto idea. And when we explain, no, it goes into the community bank, because I guess there is provisions that you can donate it for certain people. But we donate it to the entire community. So now there's an interesting thing which one of our elderly gentlemen said. He says, it's possible that this blood also goes to help a Turk, save a Turk's life. He says, yeah, absolutely. And that is the ultimate. And then you get into this whole loving your enemies to the extent of even saving their lives. So there's a lot of inside spiritual messages in the blood drive that people really wake up to. And I got to tell you honestly, there are people who just think it's just it's awful. There's no reason to do something like this. We already gave blood, that's enough. And you know, unfortunately, you're never going to change those people.
Let me ask you then about how you developed this style of action compared to the people who aren't willing to change the aspects of that community. Where did these commitments come from in you personally? And why don't we start way back.
The Don Miller days?
No, actually, you know what would be interesting is to have Father Vazken tell the story of his mother. I think you should start with your mother.
Help me out with this.
Well, I'm just thinking, I mean, his mother was a survivor of the genocide.
Grandmother.
Or grandmother, I should say. Grandmother. And I think that has profoundly affected you. So
I'm
yeah,
going to try to trace the
grandmother.
path of where, how you got to where you are today with being here as a pastor and your commitments. Why don't we start back with your grandmother?
My commitments came with, of course, it's deep-seated in our Christian tradition. I was brought up, I was a young kid during the 60s, but I went through all that movement in the 70s, and I realized that here was a power in Jesus as the head of the Christian church. Jesus was a total revolutionary who just didn't even put up with any of the status quo and didn't even want to comply. And this, I think, attracts many people to Christ. It did to me. It gave me the power to realize that here is somebody who is going against the mainstream, and he's able to do something to bring about change. For 2,000 years we've been changed. Along with that, I have to say that there was this big fundamentalist movement of, you read your Bible and you know your Bible and things like that. Then comes in my grandmother. I was brought up with two grandmothers, both of them survivors of the genocide. I say this because they profoundly influenced me, and here's how. I realized that here were people who had every single reason, they had every reason in the world to go against God. Now, these people who saw not only their kids, I mean, one of my grandmother had to bury a child in the desert, with no grave, because a 2-year-old kid dying of malaria, the Turks killing the families, taking the father. Now, go through some traumatic experience like this. If you ask this woman, do you believe in God? And she says, there's no way I would believe in God. God did not help us. No one would blame them. Any one of that generation. You'd say, fine, yeah, absolutely. But these are the people that, despite all that, still continue to have this real pious attitude. They were the ones who would take me to church. They were the ones who taught me the prayers that I know. And then I realized that these people, my grandmother, knew prayers, had faith, and they'd never read the Bible. So it was interesting. She had learned from the Apostolic Church. She had learned all this faith and knowledge, but had never read the Bible. And I realized that, there's a lot more to life than just what they've been trying to cram down our throats and tell us that, okay, unless you memorize these verses and things, you're not going to heaven. This generation of survivors had more faith in their little pinky than we'll ever have, than we'll ever possibly can have. And these were profound influences on me, to realize that we as Christians today have to get out of our molds and believing that, that to be a Christian is to just read and somehow put yourself in isolation. We are the world. We are part of the world. We're not isolated. We're not hermits. We are real people living in the world. And the more I started reading the Bible and reading the words of Christ, I realized that that's where he was driving us to. He kept telling us, the sons of light, the sons of this earth. And he put the Christian church in real terms in the kingdom of heaven right here in this earth, not in something to come. And so the more I realized that our obligation is to one another, not to something beyond. There's a very interesting story that Jesus says in the Gospels. He says, when you go to the altar to put your gifts down, and you remember you have something against your brother, leave your gifts there, go make amends, and then come back. What is he saying? He's saying there's something more important than God. It's very interesting. That's how I translate it. God's here at the altar, but there's something more important than God. Leave God there, go and take care of your brothers, deal with your families, deal with your loved ones, and then come back. And this is something that I drive home to people. It doesn't make sense to come here and thumb through Bibles and read these things. Look at that generation of survivors who didn't need all that extra kind of stuff, but still had the faith. And that's the kind of thing, that's the faith that Jesus is talking about. And that's what I think your question gets me to move in these directions. Not taking things for granted and not just listening to what everybody tells you, what a priest or what the church should do.
let me ask you, which came first,